cut the binding strips out of the sides, and we're going to glue the purfling to them now. I like to do that now and then thickness them and then bend them. I use this little contraption that I made out of scrap wood to clamp the purfling to the binding. So I'm going to put some glue here. When you've glued the purfling to the binding, you're going to have to scrape it flush and bring the bindings to the final thickness. So I take my scraper blade and check with calipers and scrape away. Now I do it like this, but you can use your sanding board if you like, or sanding block, sorry, and just sand it like this. And if you do, go only in one direction, so front to back. Because if you come back like this and you exert too much force, then the binding may come up like this. I don't know if you can see this, but the binding may come up like this and it will break, so be careful. After I've thicknessed the bindings, I tape them together in two pairs, like this, so there's no mistakes when I bend them. And I've thicknessed them to 1.8 millimeters. Waist is here. I mark the waist like this. If you had some trouble bending the sides, you'll find that this is the purflings bind a lot easier, the binding and purfling. I don't use any water at all on these, actually, no moist. Before you cut the binding channel, you have to sand the sides with 120 grit paper. Let's see, because maybe you have some rougher sanding marks from before, or maybe some scorching from when we bent the sides. So what I do first is I make the back and the top flush with the sides using a scraper blade, and then I use the 120 grit sandpaper glued onto a block, and I also have this one that goes right into the waist, because you can't reach that with a square block. I use gloves and a sanding mask at this stage because I'm a bit allergic to cocobolo. We're going to cut the binding channel for this guitar by hand, so we need our purfling cutter and a sharp chisel, and I've secured my guitar to the top by putting it in this cradle-like thingy, but you can also maybe clamp it with 4 blocks to your workbench, and these have cork linings so you don't damage the top or back of the guitar. We do this in 2 steps. First we cut the purfling channel, which is a bit wider than, well, it's the binding and the purfling combined, and that's only half the thickness of your top deep, so it's about 1 millimeter deep. And then we cut the binding channel, which is 1.8 millimeters wide and about 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch deep, because, well, you can see it all the way on the side. So set your purfling cutter to the desired width and then cut the purfling channel. There we are. And now take your chisel and start taking away the material. Maybe you're not right up to 1 millimeter deep. I'm not, I'm 1/2 millimeter deep, I think, or maybe a bit less. So I'm going to have to cut the purfling channel twice. Because of the grain of the wood, you can't just cut in any direction, but let me show you. I'll mark it on the top and show you in which directions to cut, so as to not go against the grain of the top. This doesn't apply to the cut you make with the purfling cutter, but if you cut with the chisel, then cut in these directions and you shouldn't have any trouble with the grain of the wood. That's it. No. When I cut the channel for the purfling, I stop shy of the inlay of the back, so I can miter the side, the side and the back together like so. And if you cut through the inlay on the back, well, you can, but then it would look something like this or this, and I don't like that very much. I like the 90-degree angle, almost 90-degree angle that you get here, and the same goes for the inlay on the tail, of course. Cutting the binding channel is pretty much the same as the purfling channel, so set your purfling cutter to the correct depth and then scribe a line into the sides. So first ½ millimeter you take away like this, then you set the depth of the purfling cutter a bit deeper and do the other ½ millimeter, and then so right until you're down to 1.7 or 1.8 millimeters. With the purfling cutter you won't be able to make it all the way to where the top and the fretboard meet, so you're going to have to do that with a little chisel. This is a 2 millimeter chisel, so all the way there. And that's the purfling, and for the binding, start here and just extend from where I got here somewhere. So I'm going to have to go all the way into the neck, so I can glue the binding and then put the fretboard over that. And I'll just take off ½ millimeter at a time. My piece of purfling and piece of binding tell me that this fits nicely, so I'm going to stop here, I think. So I've glued the binding to the guitar body, and I'm removing some last pieces of tape, and now I can scrape the binding flush with the body using a scraper blade. You can also use a chisel or sandpaper on a block. I like to use the scraper blade, and then it's time to start working on the fretboard.